One day, I got a call on my phone from a surprising person. Patricia, it was my ex wife, Patricia, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years since our divorce. After Patricia got custody of our daughter, Sarah, and refused any visitation, I hadn't heard a word from her for over a decade. To be honest, I wanted to see my daughter, Sarah, but considering the reasons behind our divorce, I couldn't just selfishly push for that. So, to suddenly get a call from Patricia, I couldn't shake a bad feeling. When I answered, that feeling proved to be right. My name is Joseph Anderson, 46 years old. I used to work for a trading company, but now I'm a freelance game developer. I've always loved games and secretly dreamed of creating them one day. So even though it took me a while, I'm thrilled to have this job now. But the game developer world has its highs and lows. And needless to say, I'm at the lower end. Sure, I achieved my dream of being in the industry, but I've been struggling. I'm confident about the games I release, but they just don't get the recognition I expect. According to the sales rep, my game isn't selling because the characters aren't appealing enough. And deep down, I kind of knew that. I love games, and I understand that animation, including character design, is crucial for games. But actually doing it myself, that's a whole other story. I'm not bragging, but as a kid, my drawings were so bad that everyone in class would point and laugh when they saw my work displayed. While I can imagine and build game plots and stories just fine, when it comes to character design, I draw a complete blank. Honestly, I'm just not cut out for that side of things. I've known this long before I got into this line of work, which is why I've always outsourced character design and graphics. Of course, I bear a lot of the blame for not conveying the game's vision and characters well to the freelancers. Actually, maybe the problem starts with me not picking the right designer for the game's world in the first place. I'm not sure what the biggest issue is, but I definitely feel that the character designs don't do justice to my games. So, while it's frustrating, I get why sales are disappointing and why the sales rep criticizes me. But every time, I just tell myself, next time, and nothing has changed in years. I feel stuck in this cycle, frustrated with myself, but unsure how to break out of it, just coasting along. Then one day, something bad happened, a situation where I couldn't afford to be complacent anymore. If your next game doesn't sell, we may have to consider ending our contract. That's what my longtime rep finally told me. I was on the edge of a cliff. He's a tough guy, but he's been there for me all this time, so it meant a lot that he'd stuck with me this long. I thought I was doing my best, but maybe deep down, I'd been taking it for granted, thinking they'll never really cut me off. If my rep, who had always stood by me, had to go this far, it showed just how serious the situation was. I felt ashamed of my own immaturity, but I couldn't dwell on that forever. If I had time to feel down, I had to use it to make a game that would finally sell. But to do that, I needed to face the one thing I'd been avoiding: character design. There's no way I could do the drawing myself. So I'd have to either reach out to connections in the industry or search desperately on social media. I was organizing every idea I could think of in my head when suddenly, I got a call on my phone from a surprising person. Patricia. It was my ex-wife, Patricia, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. I have a daughter with Patricia, so we'd stayed in touch for a while after the divorce. But after she got custody and denied me visitation, I hadn't heard from her in over 10 years. To be honest, I wanted to see my daughter, Sarah. But given the reasons for our divorce, I couldn't bring myself to ask. So, when Patricia called out of the blue, I worried something had happened to our daughter, and I answered in a hurry. And my gut feeling was right. Sarah's been hospitalized. She's unwell. I'm too busy with work to visit her, so I need you to take care of her instead. That was pretty much the point. And really, this was all Patricia said in our first conversation in a decade. Without waiting for my response, she only told me the hospital's location and then abruptly hung up. That's right, Patricia's always been that way. I sighed, realizing it's been a while since I last remembered that about her. But more than anything, I was worried about Sarah. I'd heard it wasn't life-threatening, just something psychological. But mental illness doesn't heal overnight. Surely, she'd want her mom close during a time like this. I get that work can be demanding. But after 15 years with no contact, would it really help her to suddenly see her dad again? Even that thought crossed my mind. But in the end, I couldn't stop worrying about Sarah. And now that I'd finally been given permission to see her, I decided to head to the hospital I'd been told about. Patricia and I met through a mutual friend. At the time, I worked for a trading company and made a decent salary for someone my age, so I was considered high spec by today's standards. But I never thought of myself that way. I just happened to get a job offer by luck during my job hunt. That was all. I didn't have any special talents, and no matter how much people praised me, I'd never once thought I was anything extraordinary. Then I met Patricia, who was unlike anyone else I knew, a proud, independent woman. She didn't flatter me or try to win me over. She just treated me casually, which I appreciated. Well, you could say she had a bit of a looking down on others attitude. I'm generally easygoing and find it simpler to go along with others' suggestions. So I was probably a good match for Patricia, who liked to get her way. Our opposite personalities actually worked well together, and we ended up getting married. However, while our contrasting traits worked during our dating phase at a certain distance, once we were married, became a family, and had to share responsibilities and raise a child, those differences became a serious obstacle. Patricia took a break from work when she got pregnant and focused on raising our child. I had to work hard to support the family in her place. Around that time, I was young but felt an even stronger sense of responsibility, and it was right when I got a promotion and raise. While it was great to have more income, the job became unbelievably demanding for a few years. I had to move from one location to another for work. Even hearing the news of my daughter's birth while on assignment and only occasionally visiting to see her. I wanted to be involved in raising her, but there's only so much one person can do. Still, I believed working hard was my way of supporting my family. With that thought in mind, I kept pushing myself at work. However, pouring all my energy into work wasn't the right path. At least, not for me. Due to the excessive workload and harassment from my boss, I developed depression and was forced to leave my jobs. By then, our daughter, Sarah, was already 3 years old, and we finally got a chance to live together as a family of 3. But just because we could now live as a family didn't mean everything went smoothly. For one, I struggled with depression, which put a lot of strain on Patricia in various ways. Also, since I suddenly couldn't work anymore, Patricia had to go back to work, even though she had been focusing on child rearing. She had always planned to return to work eventually, but I'm sure she had her own plans and timeline in mind. All you ever do is mess up my life. Patricia started saying things like that whenever we talked. I couldn't argue back because she was right. I was aware that our relationship was cracking and getting worse, but I didn't know how to bridge the gap. A year into this strained life, Patricia lost all patience and asked for a divorce, and I had no right to refuse, given how much trouble I'd caused. Since my depression hadn't healed and I couldn't return to work, custody went to Patricia as well. So, in reality, I only lived with my daughter, Sarah, for the year between leaving my job and the divorce. The last time I saw her, she was 3 years old. She must be 18 now. She probably doesn't even remember me. With that thought, I asked a nurse at the station for Sarah's room and knocked on the door. Knock, knock. Yes. A girl's voice answered from inside. After 15 years, I was finally about to see my precious daughter again. I walked into the room, feeling nervous, and noticed Sarah quickly hiding something under her pillow. Honestly, I was curious about what it was, but I didn't want to seem overbearing after all this time. What caught my attention more was how frail she looked, though I'd heard her condition was psychological. I couldn't help but wonder if there was something I could do to help her, my mind racing with possibilities. It's been a long time. You probably don't remember me, but I'm your dad. Patricia should have let Sarah know that her father was coming to visit. Even so, to Sarah, I must feel like just a stranger, an unknown middle-aged man at best. I was a bit nervous about how she'd react. Mom told me, thanks for coming today. Sarah seemed just as awkward as I felt, stumbling over her words a bit. But she seemed mostly open to my visit, which was a huge relief. The fact that she accepted me made me so happy that I nearly broke into a smile. But I held it back, not wanting to seem odd. Then I took a seat in the chair a little distance from her bed, and we made small talk. I avoided talking about anything too heavy, like why we couldn't see each other or her illness, since that might be a burden on her. So we just chatted about light things like TV shows and popular foods. Trivial stuff like that. Even so, just being able to chat with Sarah about anything at all felt like a dream come true. And though I knew I was only seeing a glimpse of her, she seemed healthier than I'd imagined, which was comforting. At first, I thought I'd just be content seeing her face. But the more I saw her there, alive, the more I found myself wanting to help somehow. Getting a bit carried away, I decided to ask her about something that had been on my mind. That looks like a sketchbook. Do you like drawing? It was the something she'd hurriedly hidden when I first walked in. The edge of it was sticking out, and I was pretty sure it was a sketchbook. When I pointed it out, Sarah froze for a moment. Oh, had I overstepped? Just when the tension between us was starting to ease, I regretted pushing too far. If you don't want to talk about it. Just as I started to say that, Sarah pulled it out from under her pillow and said, "Yeah, I like drawing." I was surprised, and before I knew it, I blurted out, "Wow, it's amazing. It's like a photograph. Could I see more?" Sarah hugged the sketchbook tightly, but through her arms, I could glimpse what she'd drawn. Orange, pink, yellow. A gradient sunset, or maybe a sunrise. It was probably done with colored pencils, but it looked so vivid it was like a real scene was unfolding before my eyes. Because I've always wanted to draw well but couldn't, those words just came out from the bottom of my heart. Sarah seemed surprised by my reaction, her eyes widening, but then, a bit shyly, she handed me her sketchbook. I flipped through the pages of the sketchbook she'd given me. The sunset I saw earlier, then a blue sky on the next page. There were also drawings of night skies, fresh greenery, autumn leaves, all kinds of scenes. Did you draw all of these, Sarah? At my question, Sarah nodded quietly. Amazing. I believe there are many skills that can improve with practice. But I always thought that certain abilities, to some extent, tend to resemble those of one's parents. Considering how terrible I am at drawing, I was genuinely shocked that Sarah could create such beautiful artwork. I don't remember anymore, but was Patricia good at drawing too, perhaps? With that thought in mind, I asked Sarah, "You're so talented at drawing, so why did you hide it earlier? I'm sure anyone who sees these would be amazed." Sarah blushed and said, "Thank you," then began to explain. "When I draw, Mom gets mad at me." "Why?" I stopped myself just before those words left my mouth. A memory, almost faded away, suddenly resurfaced. That's right. Why did I ever wonder if Patricia liked drawing? She was always the one who hated those kinds of hobbies the most. Yes, I knew very well how Patricia felt about these things. Outgoing and drawn to flashy activities. Patricia had disliked my hobbies reading and gaming even before we got married, calling them gloomy. I'd felt restricted by that, yet I also enjoyed the excitement of the trips and surfing outings she invited me to. Or perhaps, deep down, I'd just been trying to convince myself that I did. Patricia's disapproval of hobbies only intensified after we got married. She said reading was a waste of time and even called gaming childish and disgusting. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just stressed during her pregnancy. But I understood all too well the pain of having something you love criticized and belittled. It feels like having your very identity rejected. Such a miserable feeling. Thinking about that reminded me of the year leading up to our divorce. Patricia had told me daily to take Sarah to the park, take photos, and show them to her. I thought it was a mother's love, wanting to see how our daughter was doing while she was away. But if it was really to make sure I wasn't doing any of those gloomy activities she hated, then Sarah, even from such a young age, might have been living under that oppressive control. If that's true, I can't believe I was so close and didn't notice. How foolish I was. It's too late to change anything now, but I can't help feeling ashamed. I'll finally be free from living with someone as gloomy as you. That was Patricia's parting shot during the divorce. I can only hope those words were directed at me as the hated husband, and that she hasn't said anything like that to Sarah. How painful must it be to have your mother reject the things you love? I didn't want to be tacky enough to ask Sarah outright, but the way she hid her sketchbook almost gave me the answer. No matter the situation, it's true that Patricia raised Sarah alone for these 15 years. I have to be grateful for that, and I don't intend to condemn everything she's done. But if Sarah's heart is worn down to the point of hospitalization, and it's because of her mother, maybe I'm the only one who can do something as her father. With that thought, I began to visit Sarah's hospital room whenever I could find the time. Most of our conversations are about trivial things, nothing you'd call productive. But Sarah is bored in the hospital, and I have almost no friends to chat with about everyday things. So this time together has become a nice break for both of us. The situation being what it is, my work remains busy. Yet somehow, spending time with Sarah has given me more motivation than ever. In the beginning, we were both a bit formal, and silences felt awkward. But now, 4 months since our reunion, that awkwardness seems to have faded. It's been so nice having you visit, Dad. It gives me something to look forward to every day. Hearing Sarah say that means the world to me. As for Patricia, while she replies when Sarah reaches out, she has barely visited her during this entire time. Knowing Patricia, who loves the flashy side of life and has her pride, she probably finds the idea of dutifully visiting the hospital unpleasant, but to not show up when her own daughter is hospitalized. I keep my frustrations to myself, though. Talking about random things, looking at Sarah's drawings together. In these small ways, we've been bridging the 15-year gap between us. One day, the sunset streaming into the hospital room was beautiful, and Sarah began drawing the scene. I simply sat beside her, watching quietly, but a deep, nostalgic feeling washed over me. It feels like this has happened before. As I was thinking that, Sarah said something surprising. It's nostalgic, isn't it? What? There was a time when I was little, and I drew in front of you, right? Mom always disliked me drawing, so we didn't have art supplies at home. But after we went to the zoo together, I said I wanted to draw. Then you bought me a sketchbook and crayons. I only drew some clumsy pictures of the animals we'd just seen, but I remember feeling so happy as you sat beside me, smiling as you watched. Listening to Sarah, I was honestly taken aback. We had only spent a year together, and Sarah was just 3 years old. So I'd thought those memories would have faded. But knowing she remembered that moment we shared so clearly made me indescribably happy. I remember that too. Thanks for telling me. I fought back tears and replied. Then Sarah added, afterward, you made up a short story based on my drawings, and I loved listening to that story. The fact that she remembered something I'd nearly forgotten was so surprising, and it gave me an idea. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind. I then told Sarah about my work and the game I was planning. I explained how, unlike her, I'm terrible at drawing and have been struggling with character design. And then, Sarah, your delicate art style perfectly fits the world I envision for my game. Of course, only if it's not too much for you. Would you be interested in making a game with me? As I spoke, I realized it was a bold proposal. After all, she's my daughter, still in high school, and she's in the hospital due to illness. But no character designer I've met has ever felt quite right, and I realized that Sarah's style would be perfect. I've never seen anyone create artwork so delicate yet romantic, stirring people's hearts like she does. Maybe it sounds like I'm being a doting parent, but I truly believe her art has that kind of power. So, one reason was that, as a game creator, I wanted her help. But there was another reason too. I thought it would be wonderful if we could create something together, laughing just like we did back then. Sarah listened to me, clearly surprised. With a slightly unsure look, she said, do you think I can do it? She really is my daughter, I think to myself. But it sounds fun. If it's with you, Dad, I'll give it a try. Her passion for what she loves outweighs everything else. After that, I kept visiting the hospital, dedicating myself with Sarah to character creation. Until then, I'd mostly seen her landscapes, But it turns out she'd occasionally drawn portraits as a hobby, and they were even better than I'd imagined. It was as if she understood my ideal without me needing to explain it. Our work flowed in perfect harmony. As we worked together, Sarah's health steadily improved, and soon she was discharged from the hospital. The cause of her illness was indeed stress from her mother's overbearing interference. Now, focusing on the art she loves without anyone watching over her shoulder seemed to release all the pent-up frustration, helping her heal. I don't claim to fully understand the deeper aspects of it, but I'm genuinely glad that spending time with me and working on the game didn't burden her and, in fact, had a positive impact. Of course, above all else, Sarah's health is what matters most. And a few months later, with our finished designs in hand, I visited the sales company. My rep, as if he were a different person, praised the designs wholeheartedly. The release of my new game became a hot topic everywhere. While the story was praised, the acclaim for the incredible characters was even higher. This became my first big hit, and there's even talk of a movie adaptation. As for Sarah, she finally realized the importance of her art to herself and that she had the right to choose her own path. With her game work gaining public recognition, she regained her confidence and told her mother, "I'll make my own choices in life. I'll keep drawing as much as I want, and if you can't accept that, I can't stay with you." Patricia, extreme as she often was, did genuinely care for Sarah, and being rejected by her daughter for the first time, she finally saw the error of her ways. I've heard she's mellowed out quite a bit now. Freed from her mother's influence, Sarah left home after graduating high school and started living on her own. Now, she's become my design partner in my work. Her art is highly regarded, and she recently received a character design request from a prominent animator. Seeing my daughter soar and thrive brings me joy, though I can't help but feel a little lonely too. Still, I never imagined, even a few years ago, that I'd get to feel this kind of bittersweet pride. I'll continue to watch her grow, sometimes feeling a bit wistful, but always grateful to witness her journey.